Welcome, folks, to this episode of Conceptually Speaking, where I ask Bobbie, what makes a good movie? Welcome back, folks. This is another episode, Conceptually Speaking. It does cover a concept with another video we're putting out. What, in your opinion, Bobbie, makes a good movie?
That is a very broad and tough question.
Yes.
Okay, before I answer, to be clear, are you meaning what do I think makes a good movie, like what I consider a good movie, or like what a critic considers a good movie?
What you consider makes a good movie.
Okay. Well, that's okay.
Because we're starting to do top 10 lists.
Yeah.
The first one's top 10 zombie movies.
Yeah.
Like, what makes a movie good enough to be on a top 10 list?
All right. Well, that's a slightly easier question.
In your opinion.
And I'll dovetail into the larger question from there. Okay, so to be on the top 10 list, obviously in our opinion, top 10 lists, they've got to be something that is like the uber example of the genre. So it's largely dependent on the genre. But also, on a top 10 list, there's wiggle room for movies that defy the genre, but are also still clearly part of it. To use an example, not one I would put on a top 10 list, but the kind of what I'm talking about here, like for Westerns. Now, most people view Westerns as taking place in the West, obviously, and that's the American Southwest, for those of you who don't live in the U.S. and don't know what I'm talking about. Within a certain time frame, generally, but there are modern incarnations of the Western, like
Dirty Harry.
Like Dirty Harry, No Country for Old Men, very much so. That one I would potentially put on a top 10 Western list. But also things that are kind of outside the box, like John Carpenter's Vampires. It is essentially a Western. It's about vampires.
It's in the American Southwest.
Yeah, like that one I probably wouldn't put that one on top 10 Westerns, because there's other Westerns that are better at being Westerns. But
yes.
that's kind of what I mean whenever your top 10 can include things that are outside the box and not just the uber examples. But number one's probably going to be an uber example. Like for Westerns,
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, the number one's probably going to be like either The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
True Grit.
Like
Rooster Cogburn.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a Clint Eastwood or John Wayne movie in all likelihood.
North to Alaska.
Yeah, I mean...
I might have to make you sit through that because I don't think you've watched it.
I have not. Now, if I were asking my dad that particular question, it would actually be a Charles Bronson movie. Once Upon a Time in the West is his favorite Western. I haven't watched it yet. I have it on my list, though. I do have a copy of it, just haven't got around to watching it. Henry Fonda's the villain in that, and he very rarely played a bad guy, but apparently does a really good job. So, for a top 10 list, that's what I look for, is what exemplifies the genre. And that's why it's also very hard for me to say like what my top 10 favorite movies, period, are. I almost have to break it down by genre.
I know the feeling.
So, because trying to pick and choose, and like we just did the top 10 zombie movies, there's 2 of those that have a shot at being on my top 10 all-time favorite movies. Okay.
Day of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead.
The original.
Yes.
And Return of the Living Dead.
Ooh. Both good choices.
Now, I don't know if they'd make the cut, but they'd be in the pool for drafting, so to speak. Now, overall, A movie, a movie has to have a lot of things. Well, okay. The way I look at movies, there is great excellence. That's the pinnacle few ever achieve. That's your Stanley Kubrick movies, some of your Steven Spielberg movies. That's like The Empire Strikes Back. You know,
Would you lump Platoon up there?
Platoon is probably close. That's Oliver Stone, right? Uh, for Oliver Stone specifically, I think Wall Street's his like better movie, but Platoon is definitely up there. It's if it's not in the Promised Land, it can see the light. Uh, Maybe some of Tarantino's movies, you know, that's what's up here. That realm few can achieve, you know, that many aspire to, but few can achieve. Then you have good movies. These are movies that you can still just watch endlessly that technically are probably nearly perfect, but they're just missing something in them. This is where I have to tear the Star Wars movies apart. This is what differentiates The Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back. To my mind, Empire is the one that's up here. It's what the entire franchise is built on, essentially. Like A New Hope's great, but A New Hope is just more or less a straightforward action movie with a little bit of space magic. Empire is where the real, like, the story everyone cares about emerges. Return of the Jedi is where it finishes, but some corners got cut. We get teddy bears, and you know, like, some things slipped.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, so yeah, that's what kind of differentiates it. There's just something that's not there. Like it's either the level of seriousness, or I was actually watching a video earlier today of this girl watching the movie for the first time. I never really thought about it like this, but Empire has like a single flowing narrative. You don't really feel the movie break itself apart in acts. You do for Return of the Jedi, because you've got, let's go to Jabba the Hutt, let's go to Yoda and the Emperor showing up. All right, let's plan the attack on the Death Star. Let's go attack the Death Star. You know.
Yeah.
There's another break in there, and A New Hope's a lot like that too. Whereas Empire is just like, it just happens.
It's a narrative flow.
Know, and that's that movie needed. So, I mean, you know, obviously on the technical level, you want everything to look great, sound great. Sometimes, you know, you have to be forgiving of older movies because they didn't have all the tools we have at the moment. So, like A New Hope, all right. A New Hope is pre-CGI, so there's certain elements where you're just not going to have certain things. Like whenever Vader and Obi-Wan fight, you have to accept that there were technical limitations at the time, because we can see from the prequels what Lucas intended lightsaber fights to look like.
Acrobatic,
yeah,
fancy, flourishing.
So just kind of, you basically just kind of have to let your imagination take over in A New Hope.
Also,
and Jedi.
by that point, Obi-Wan's an old man.
Yeah, this is true.
He is just human.
This is true. But I mean, but still, you got to look at it from technical limitations. Now, sometimes, and this is a case with, as I understand it, the Star Wars movies, but particularly Jaws, technical limitations improve the movie. Because with Jaws, they wanted to have a lot more of the shark, but the model didn't work. So for so much of the movie, you don't ever see it. And then it finally shows up, and it's this terror that's been killing people all this time, and now you finally see it, and it's like, oh, shit, you know, here's this giant shark. You know, you have what you
bigger boat.
You have what you have in your imagination, and then, boom, this thing hits, and you're like, oh my god.
That thing is bigger than the boat.
Yeah. And that's because of technical limitations, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, depending on the movie, this is why it's very hard to have a standard set of things here. Ideally, you have at least a few laughs along the way, you know, because life isn't 100% serious. You need those moments to break tension, even in movies. Not in every movie. I don't expect a lot of laughs out of Schindler's List, for instance. Uh, but in most movies, you want some levity here. Unless it's a comedy, in which case you want a lot of humor. Uh, but even in a comedy, you still have to have a plot, and that's probably the number one most important thing is engaging characters in an engaging scenario. Like, if you care about the characters and you're invested in what's going to happen to them, smaller defects in the movie aren't going to bother you. Okay, you're not going to be thinking about them. You're not going to be watching Pulp Fiction and notice that every single clock in the movie, every time you see it's on the same time, which is impossible. Like, that's intentional. It's just a background thing. It's intentional, but it's not going to matter. You don't care because you want to know what's going on with Vincent. You want to know what's going on with Butch. You want to know what's going on with these people.
You want to know what's in the suitcase.
You want to know what's in the suitcase. You're never going to know, but you want to know. And so there's that. A movie has to build a level of anticipation. Okay. Now we all know, going into almost every movie, that the good guys are going to win. We know this is going to happen. But what's going to matter is, what's it going to cost them along the way? Is everyone going to make it across the finish line? Is the good guy going to survive? He could win and still die. As I believe happens in a couple westerns. So, these things are important. So even if, even at like the Marvel movies, we all know the heroes are going to win. Well, except in Infinity War. But that was a two-parter, and everyone hopefully knew that going into it. Otherwise, that would have been quite the cliffhanger for you folks that didn't know that. But yeah, the hero's going to win going in. So it's a matter of the odds, the stakes, the what else is on the line. And for that to matter, you have to care about the what else. You have to care about the other characters. You have to care about the hero. Like, if you go in and, if you don't care, if you think Tony Stark is a jerk, you don't care if he lives or dies fighting Obadiah Stane at the end of the movie. He has to be a likable jerk, because he is a jerk, but he's got to be a likable jerk. So the writer and the actor have to know where that line is of, yeah, this isn't a guy I necessarily want to hang out with, but he's cool enough for this movie, I saw a comment the other day about 80s action stars. Someone was like, if you really pay attention, these guys are probably all assholes. You wouldn't want to hang out with John McClane. John McClane is like a black hole of emotion, and he, I'm sure he drinks a lot and
smokes a lot.
You would not want to hang out with this man. But in the movie, we care what's going to happen to him, because he's just a guy, terrorists showing up, and his wife's here. We know his kids are here somewhere. He's our point of view character. He's likable enough, and that's important. And so that's probably the most important part, is to get you to like the characters so that you buy into whatever the scenario is. Because there's a concept, suspension of disbelief. That's the ability to turn off that part of your brain that says, this is all fake. You know what's going to happen.
You mean you have to turn that off at the start of Indiana Jones 4? With the fridge and the nuke?
Oh, well, maybe. Look, I'm not going to sit here and rag on Indiana Jones 4. I thought it was okay.
I liked it, but I'm one of those guys that can sit down in front of a movie with a bowl of popcorn and just watch the movie.
Yeah, like that particular moment, I look at it as, this is a guy who survived being exposed to the contents of the Ark of the Covenant, which, as far as we know, only one other person did, and that's Marion. He channeled the power of Shiva it through the Shankara stones, acting as like
Untrained, he did that.
acting as the conduit of divine energy, and he drank from the Holy Grail. If in Indiana Jones 5 he gets shot in the chest and a bullet just bounces off of him, I'm going to be fine with that. Like, other people can complain about it. I'm looking at it as, have you seen what this man has done? Like, he could literally be bulletproof at this point. You know, surviving the nuke, that's nothing. I did seriously like the visual there, though, once he comes out and you see the mushroom cloud. It's literally like, okay, we're literally in the nuclear age now, you know.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very impressive visual. Like, all of the problems with the movie aside, like, I thought that was pretty
That
cool.
movie had a lot of good visuals.
My only real problem with the movie is a handful of things involving mud, mainly the swinging through the jungle part. You know, I thought that was stupid.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like, I get the inspiration because that's like a Tarzan kind of thing, and these are all built off of like older serial.
And
things.
we've seen Indiana Jones swing on his whip before.
Yeah, like I get it, but that's like I was talking about earlier. That fine line that was on the wrong side of it. So yeah, that's got to be the core part, and then from there, your story has to be believable enough. If it's going to be a great movie, it's got to be really believable and pretty airtight. If it's going to be at least a good movie, it can have fridge logic in it. That's a concept for those of you who've never heard of it. The idea is you go, you watch a movie, it all makes sense while you're watching it. But then, somewhere later on that night, like for instance, while you're in the refrigerator trying to get something to eat, all of a sudden it clicks like, hey, wait a minute. That guy wasn't laser proof. Why did the lasers bounce off of him with no, or whatever whatever the situation is? That's fridge logic. It's enough in the moment to make sense, but the moment you're out of it and you really start thinking about it, it's all going to fall apart. Good movies can have those moments because it's fictional narratives. They're not going to be perfect. I love picking apart those kinds of things in movies, but the only time it detracts from my enjoyment of the movie is if I am so out of the movie that I begin to notice it while I'm watching the movie. And that's what happened to me while I was watching The Last Jedi.
Ooh.
There came a point in the movie where the thought literally went through my mind, I do not care at all what happens to any of these people. And from then on, the movie was just picking it apart in my mind. And for like the first 24 hours afterwards, I thought, well, maybe I'm just being too harsh on it. But then I really was able to think about it, and I realized, no, this movie's no good. But we're not going to go into that.
That's another video.
That's an example of the production values are there, the acting talent's there, and just everything else goes wrong. Mainly the script, and subverting expectations, like my expectation for a good movie. Yeah, that's a neat trick, isn't it? But yeah, you've got, like I said, the focus. It's you have to care about the character. That's the primary thing. Then after that, it's very hard to overcome that if you don't care about the character. Like you can have the greatest theme song ever, the whiz bang special effects. The thing can win 10 Academy Awards. But if you don't care about the character, you just don't care about any of that. And, yeah. I mean, that's, like Saving Private Ryan. Excellent movie. Totally robbed at the Oscars. I'll take that comment to my grave. I don't care what else won. That's what should have won for Best Picture.
That is a very good movie.
But the reason you care, the reason you watch it, is because you care about the characters. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's generic casting. It's the random kind of tough looking guys. We only learn a few things about them, but we learn enough. We learn enough, and we envision ourselves in that situation, even if we've never been anywhere near a combat zone. And just the trials and tribulations, the loss.
How tight they must be just for one to be like, yeah, this is what I did before the war to get them all back on track.
Right, and for that punch at the end to really hit you where it counts. Whenever you realize the old man wasn't Tom Hanks, the old man was Matt Damon, and he's sitting there, and he's begging his wife
Have I lived a good
to
life?
to validate his existence because he knows men died to save him.
Almost a full squad died
Yeah,
to save him.
and the reason, and we only care because we cared about the characters up to this point. You know, that's why that scene brings a tear to my eye, and I'm not afraid to admit it. You know, that's gut wrenching. You know, but it's because of the fact, it's because we care, and that is owed tremendously to Steven Spielberg. Spielberg has a way, his directing method. He knows he's very empathic. You can tell because he knows how to do the close up of the faces because that's how you connect with people. That's why people love the videos on YouTube because it feels like we're talking to each other, even though we're not. But that's what it feels like. Uh, versus TV or movies where people look slightly off camera because you're supposed to be an outside observer. It's a little
Yes.
little filming trick for those of you that didn't know that. It's also why newscasters are trusted because they're talking to you directly to the camera, to you. It's like they're right there in your living room.
We have hit varying degrees of success paying attention to the camera.
Yeah. So, but the way Steven Spielberg films things, he knows when and how to get in there so you can feel what the characters are feeling. He's very good at that, and that's something he's perfected over his time. Uh, and that's why, at least for me, it's kind of hard to tell which parts of AI he for sure made and which parts Kubrick made, because Kubrick started making it before he died, and so it's kind of you can feel Kubrick's fingerprints on it because it's a dark movie. But there's those moments where you think it's probably Spielberg, because the emotion that's coming through, you know, Kubrick. Most of his movies were on the dark end of the equation, but they're very very visual.
Yes.
Okay, like all the stuff in The Shining. Once they get to the hotel, the big broad shots to see like the big patterns in the carpets, the maze. The close up of when Jack Torrance is busting his way through the door. Things like that. You see it also in 2001.
The long shots of the ship.
Yeah, the long shots, the silence in space, because space is silent. The fact that there's a level of detail, and you could see how that definitely influenced George Lucas. The detail of the space stuff, because whenever he was explaining Star Wars originally, he's like this,
but faster.
but fast. And you could see it. You could see the inspiration. So yeah, I mean, beyond the beyond the character, the script is probably the second most important part because that's a huge reason why we care about the characters. Now, obviously, if it's a well-known actor, oh, it's Matt Damon. Well, we all love Matt Damon, so of course we're going to care what happens to Matt Damon. Unless the script goes out of its way to make Matt Damon into a chode, there's going to be some built-in cachet there for Matt Damon. But the script has to do most of the heavy lifting. It's got to get us past okay, well, we like him because he's Matt Damon, but what you doing for me now, Matt Damon? I like you because you're in The Martian, but this isn't The Martian. Why do I care about you here?
Yes.
Matt Damon got me in the door. The script's got to keep me there. And, honestly, effects are probably distant. Because they're either going to look good or they're going to look bad. Bad effects can ruin a good movie. But
good effects cannot save a bad movie.
Good effects can't save a bad movie. And even bad effects are really just going to lower people's opinion of the movie. They're still going to say that was a good movie, but for this, and also nowadays we're to the point where unless you're an independent movie, there's no excuse to have bad special effects. Going into it what they're going to cost, what you can do. You either cut the scenes you can't afford, or you do something else.
Or you specifically make a movie with that tone.
Yeah, I mean, there's no excuse. Now, music is very, in my opinion, it's highly underrated because people just don't talk about it much when it comes to movies, but it's very important. Sets the mood, sets the tone. I mean, Star Wars would be a different movie entirely if it wasn't for John Williams' score.
Yeah.
You know, it's that is part of the movie that's ingrained in it. Uh, 2001 with its with its orchestral music, for the long shots through space. Jaws with the music. Halloween with John Carpenter's score. I got to agree with Joe Bob Briggs, probably the best known horror movie theme right there. And he really hated to admit that too, because he was really hoping to come up with something from some off the wall movie. But he's like, no, it's got to be Halloween. It's got to be. Uh, I'll give you a perfect example that he brought up on one of his shows recently of how little people respect the soundtrack to horror movies. Uh, the guy who did the soundtrack to The Thing, I believe it's Enrico Morricone, also did the soundtrack to The Hateful Eight, and used like 3 or 4 of the same songs. The Thing, nothing. Hateful Eight wins an Academy Award for the same music, just because it's in a Tarantino movie instead. So yeah, that's what you get.
That's weird.
Yeah. So, but music is very important, particularly to horror, because the music it builds the tension
It
and
sets the emotion as
and,
well.
it's subconscious unless you're able to completely take yourself out of the movie. Because if you can, you'll know once the music dies down completely, that's when the jump scare is coming. But if you're not, but if the music has lulled you into it, you're not going to notice the music has stopped, and then the jump scare hits. But that's what happens. And for the first Paranormal Activity, the sound editing and the music was, well, no music, it's all sound editing, was very important for the movie to set the tone, because the movie began setting expectations of when the demon thing was around, because you can't see it, with the sound in the background. And so that's when you would know, like, things would appear to be normal, but then you'd start, like, the dread would start, because you'd start to hear the sound. You're like, okay, what's coming up? So yeah, it's a lot of factors, but I think at the end of the day, you have to care about the characters. Like, I think that's the most important factor. Everything else is just, the other parts. That's what'll differentiate you between, good and great, or okay and good. If you're down into bad, all kinds of things have gone wrong. Like, a lot. Like, you should just stop making movies, probably. So, yeah.
All right.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I mean,
10 cents.
I can't explain what makes a movie where I can just sit back and watch it. Like, I just sit back and watch a movie.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a bunch of moving parts that you don't think about, unless you know stuff about movies, and then you have to get into the mindset to watch it critically, and not for entertainment. Okay, because it does require a mindset. Because
Yeah, I'm of the opinion of movies for entertainment, folks.
Yeah, there's movies I like that I know are not A-list movies. I know they're not. I know that they're probably closer to trash for some of them.
It's a horrible movie, folks. Bad in every sense, but I do enjoy watching Super Mario Brothers occasionally.
Yeah.
It's a bad movie. I can tell you that, and I can't tell you what makes a great movie. But it's a bad movie, but I still like to watch it occasionally.
Yeah. I mean, we all have those guilty pleasures. Those movies that it's not a good movie, but something about it, like it's got a certain scene, or it's got a song, or it's like you like one of the actors, or you think one part's well written, just something clicks, and to you, that's a watchable movie, which means it's at least good. Hopefully you're not holding it up on a pedestal, but
No, Super Mario Brothers is not on a pedestal. It's like at the back of the shelf where I have to dig through other movies to get to it, but it is there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the best answer I've got for you, Chad.
It answers my question. So it's characters, story, music. In that order of importance.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously, things like cinematography are going to matter. Cinematography can be more important than music, depending on the movie. Uh, and they can make a movie too. Like, one of the reasons that some people like certain westerns is because they're actually filmed in the southwestern United States, and you can see, as for those of you who've never been there, it's going to sound odd, but there is a beauty to that desolate, sand-blasted desert that we call the Southwest.
Well, I know north to Alaska, they actually got John Wayne and everybody to go to Alaska to film it.
Yeah.
And it was actually John Wayne wading into freezing cold waters in the scene where he's dunking. I can't remember the guy's name. It's a musician.
That's all right.
But he's dunking him in a Alaskan river that's flowing.
But
yeah. It's literally them getting into the river.
Yeah, so cinematography, it can matter a lot. Because there's movies that have just big, empty scenes in them that you got to fill with something. Whereas opposed to like The Fugitive or something, The Fugitive, it's action, it's going. You don't have time to sit and take in the landscape. It's like it's Harrison Ford going through the countryside and the eyes in Chicago.
U.S. Marshals is the same way.
You need a few establishing shots in Chicago. That's pretty much it. It's probably not even filmed in Chicago. It's probably filmed in like Indianapolis or Gary or something. They just had a couple shots of the Sears Tower or something. I mean, that's what they do in movies. For those of you that don't know that, like they'll like Escape from New York was filmed almost entirely in St. Louis. Okay, there's only a couple shots actually filmed in New York City. So that's what you can do whenever you just need like blighted urban hellscape. It doesn't have to be the city you're actually in. It just has to look like blighted urban hellscape. Which there was a part of the city the power was out, and that's where they filmed it there. So yeah.
Hey. Power's out. Can you keep it that way for about 2 weeks?
Yeah.
We will give money to everyone impacted.
So yeah, I mean that's films do that. That's where cinematography is important because you need the establishing shots. And if you ever see Wayne's World 2, they make fun of this because they're like, "Oh, we got to go to England," and so it's just two guys you can't see their faces. Like this is clearly us in London, England, because the studio would definitely pay to send us over here. It's just two extras. Because it costs a lot more money to send the stars because they're going to go first class.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's important too. Like I said, effects is probably like the last thing on the list. It's an icing on the cake. It's not gonna. It could break your movie, but I don't think it's gonna make your movie, unless you're like teetering on the edge. And if you've gotten there, you've done other things wrong. So, yeah, that's my opinion. Anyway.
Well, folks. Thank you for watching this. Hopefully, you guys will keep this stuff in mind as we go forward with top 10 lists.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe, share it around if you think you should.
Yep. Comment.
And if you are in the path of Hurricane 9, stay safe out there.
Yeah.
Don't go doing anything that'd risk your life for something that's easily replaceable.
Yeah. So.
We'll see you next time, folks.
See you later.